Thousands protest in Washington against Trump as he prepares for inauguration. Thousands of mostly female demonstrators took to the streets of Washington, D.C. on Saturday to rally against President-elect Donald Trump 2 days ahead of his inauguration. The People's March, previously known as the Women's March, has taken place every year since 2017. A coalition of groups organized the movement with the stated aim of confronting Trumpism, according to its website. Smaller protests against Trump were held in New York City and on the other side of the country in Seattle. The rallies coincide with Trump's arrival to the nation's capital for a series of weekend events in the lead-up to his swearing-in ceremony on Monday. Saturday's People's March in Washington, D.C. drew smaller numbers than its predecessors, but still boasted thousands of marchers. The protesters gathered at 3 parks before marching to the Lincoln Memorial for the rally. The groups behind the march are described on its website as holding intersecting identities and having varied issue-based interests with different causes such as climate change, immigration, and women's rights. Women who gathered in Washington to join the People's March told the BBC they had a variety of motivations. One protester, Brooke, said she wanted to show her support for abortion access. "I'm really not happy with the way our country's voted," she said. "I'm really sad that our country's leaned towards a president that's already failed us once, and that we did not nominate a female candidate." Another woman, Kayla, said it's a mix of emotions that brought her out to the streets of the nation's capital. "Honestly, I'm just mad. I'm sad, I'm overwhelmed," she said. The first iteration of the People's March came together after Trump defeated Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton in 2016. Women called for a protest the day after Trump's first inauguration, and hundreds of thousands responded. The movement spread beyond the nation's capital, with millions of women across the U.S. carrying signs, railing against the Republican president, and sporting pink knit pussy hats, a reference to a leaked tape in which Trump had bragged about grabbing women's genitals. The Women's March remained a key part of the so-called resistance to Trump's agenda in the years that followed. But none of the subsequent marches have been on the same scale. Trump, meanwhile, arrived in Washington, D.C. later on Saturday to begin his inaugural festivities with a private event featuring fireworks at his golf club in the Virginia suburbs. Organizers of the march said they aim to confront Trump by drawing on past successes and effective strategies against autocrats. A small group of Trump supporters were at the Washington Monument on Saturday. Noticing the men in red Make America Great Again hats, one People's March leader with a megaphone approached chanting, "No Trump, no KKK." One of the men, Timothy Wallace, told the Associated Press news agency his friends had just bought the Trump hats from a street vendor. M.R. Wallace, 58, of Pocatello, Idaho, said the People's March protesters had every right to demonstrate, though he said he was confused by the rancor. "It's sad where we're at as a country," he said. Another protester the BBC spoke to came to Washington specifically for the march. Susie came in from the San Francisco area to demonstrate with her sister, and who lives nearby. They both attended the Women's March after Trump's first inauguration and came back in their pussy hats. Susie recalled the crowds of people in 2017. She said she hoped people would still take to the streets against Trump's policies. "This time the stakes are higher," she said. "Trump has been emboldened. He's got the billionaire class and the tech class bowing down." And also said she recognized the protesters are out of touch with a lot of America. Trump won all 7 swing states and the popular vote last November. But she added, "We're still here, and we will resist. We are getting closer to the day when we might see my grandfather," he said. "But at the same time, today has been very, very hard, because we don't know whether he is dead or alive. We don't know whether to prepare for a funeral or a festival." In exchange for the 3 hostages released on Sunday, Israel's prison service released 90 Palestinians from Ofer Detention Center in the occupied West Bank early on Monday. They were also handed over to the Red Cross before being taken to a designated area from where they will be allowed to return home. In the nearby West Bank town of Baitunia, crowds gathered to wait for the prisoners, with some starting fires to create roadblocks. For families in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, there is still great concern that the fragile ceasefire could collapse over the next 6 weeks. The delays on Sunday morning were quickly overcome, But a spokesman for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated that Israel retains the right to continue our war aims in Gaza if the conditions of the deal are broken again. In Israel on Sunday, several far-right ministers resigned in protest over the terms of the deal, further weakening Netanyahu's already fragile hold on government. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, the deal's most prominent critic, has long objected to the ceasefire, saying it comes ahead of Israel's main war aim of destroying Hamas in the Gaza Strip. That he declared on Sunday that his far-right Jewish Power Party would resign en masse from the government. Though he pledged not to attempt to overthrow the government, the move leaves the embattled prime minister with just a razor-thin majority in parliament. Speaking at a news conference on Sunday, Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar said he would not speak against those who had objected to the deal, which he said brought a heavy price for Israel. Any agreement with a terror organization is a bad event, he said. Releasing terrorists from our jails is a heavy price, with risks. Sa'ar acknowledged that there had been a very serious debate within government about the terms of the deal. But we are doing it because of our commitment to our brothers and sisters who are under captivity for more than 15 months already. We will do our utmost to release them. The BBC understands that under an agreement with Israel, control of checkpoints in Gaza previously manned by the Israeli military would be handed over to Hamas police, which will manage the flow of displaced people north as Israel withdraws. The arrangement raises questions about how fighters will be prevented from also moving north, and there are fears of chaos as a mass of people moves and attempts to access aid entering the Strip. Aid lorries began entering Gaza on Thursday 15 minutes after the ceasefire came into effect. But the scale of the need is enormous. Even before the conflict, Gaza was heavily dependent on aid. With farmland and food infrastructure destroyed, UNRWA has said 600 lorries should cross into Gaza every day. Majid al-Ansari, the Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesman, told the BBC that a dedicated operations center in Cairo would monitor the ceasefire from abroad to try and make sure there was a minimum level of chaos as a result of aid going in. But he added that for the first phase, Hamas would essentially be in charge of the process in Gaza. Ansari described the deal as the last chance for Gaza and the last chance for the region. This is the deal for hope. This is the deal for the future. This is a deal for all of us collectively, he said. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, whose envoy Steve Witkoff helped broker the deal alongside President Joe Biden's team, welcomed the ceasefire in a post on his social media site Truth Social. Hostages starting to come out today. 3 wonderful young women will be first, he wrote. In Gaza City on Sunday night, Abdullah Shabir, a young emergency doctor who had worked relentlessly since the day the war began, seeing hundreds of dead and treating thousands of wounded, was allowing himself a small moment of joy. It is only because these were my people I was able to keep going, he said. I don't know how to express the feeling I have now, but there is joy. The most important thing is that the bloodshed has stopped. God willing, everything else will follow.